Grandpa stole his first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, we got a couple of great guests this week, as always, of course, Genies. First of all, we're going to talk to Mary Kathryn Kozy and Cara Jones there with FamilySearch.org, and they've got an amazing project going on right now. It's called the War of 1812 Project. And this is actually going to connect the entries for your ancestors on FamilySearch to these War of 1812 pension applications, which in some cases can include hundreds of pages and all kinds of information, things that you might not even be able to find in church records or vital records provided by government. So you're going to want to hear more about that coming up in about 10 minutes. And then later in the show, Sonny Morton is back on the show talking about developing stories on your ancestors, and she's got a great one to share herself, so hope you'll join us for that. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, it is time. Just go to ExtremeGenes.com or our Facebook page and sign up for free. You get a blog from me each week, a couple of links to past and present shows, and links to fascinating stories, at least you'll think that, as a genealogist. Right now, off to Boston, where David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Hey, how you doing, Fish?
I am doing great. Every week of research is a lot of fun, and sometimes the news is really interesting, especially this oldest woman in America, Hester Ford, who just passed at 116. That's got to be our lead family histoire news story today, Dave.
It really is. I'll tell you, Hester had 12 children, 48 grandchildren, 108 great-grandchildren, and approximately 120 great-great-grandchildren, according to this article. That gives you a whopping 288 living descendants.
Wow. It must have been the hardest thing in the world for her to keep track of birthdays.
Birthdays, holidays. Goodness, she must have kept Hallmark in business.
Single-handedly. Well, that was an amazing life, well lived, of course. I don't know who the oldest person in America is now. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. But to die with 288 living descendants has got to be some kind of record.
It's got to be up there, that's for sure. But, you know, Hester could have been the babysitter for our next birthday wish, and that goes to Ken Potts, who is one of only 2 living survivors of the USS Arizona from Pearl Harbor. Ken, who is a native of Provo, Utah, just turned 100 years old.
Wow, that's great. And they did a little drive-by birthday party for him, too, I understand.
He did. And he's a little bit older than Lou Conta, who is our frequent flyer on our show.
That's true.
Later this year.
Yeah, Lou's going to be 100 coming up in September. We look forward to checking in with him then.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I'll tell you, I always love when people discover things. You know, occasionally people will find things when they're digging in their garden, but an Illinois man who was able to discover a tunnel under his house really kind of tops it off. I don't think I would be expecting that when I was digging in my backyard.
You know, the thing about this, David, is this is not an ordinary tunnel. When I first read that, I thought a dirt tunnel under the house, and he was talking about setting up tours if they deemed it safe. But when I saw the picture, it's all bricked. It's almost like, you know, one of those subway stations. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the 1840s, and they don't even know what the original purpose of this structure was for. You know, you can think maybe it was a place where runaway slaves could have been hiding, but it also could have been used for a subterranean tomb, maybe a family burial ground, because that harkens to what burial tombs look like, in at least up here in the Northeast when they go into check out the condition. They're all barrel vaulted like that. It's quite amazing. It's a great little video on the ExtremeGenes.com website, so you can see that link and find out more about it.
And then similarly, we go from tunnels now to walls, and I love this story from Fold 3.
It is great. These walls do talk. The Civil War signatures discovered beneath paint layers in a 19th century building in Beaufort, South Carolina. Now, Beaufort, South Carolina had a variety of stately homes that were taken over by the Union Army in 1861 and used as hospitals. Well, when the soldiers, the Union soldiers that is, were bored, they would put graffiti on the wall, write their name, draw little pictures, and they removed the layers of wallpaper only to find this. It almost seems like I wouldn't want to put the wallpaper back.
Right. I mean, this is an amazing thing to find, and hopefully they're going to get enough pictures that people who descend from them can connect.
Wouldn't it be amazing to get a note in the mail that, by the way, we found the signature of your ancestor on a wall?
Yeah, in a home taken over during the Civil War. I mean, it's a great story. Love it.
It really is. It really is. So thank you, Fold 3, for making that possible. And then we have a great story for a Seattle, Washington man who purchased at a yard sale an old photo album a few years ago, but it has such historic photos of early Washington state that it's probably priceless.
Yeah, they're saying this was actually a photographer's photo album. So he would go out with his equipment and take pictures that are capturing life at the beginning of the last century. These photos are very much revered now by historians and archivists alike.
You just never know what you're going to find. May it be on eBay or at a yard sale or under your wallpaper or in your backyard. Yeah. Just tune into Extreme Genes to find more similar stories in the weeks ahead.
Absolutely. In fact, next week on the show, we're going to talk to Kathryn Andrew, who made an amazing discovery on eBay connected to her family. You're going to want to hear her whole story when we get to that next week.
Well, that's all I have from Beantown this week. But remember, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you can become a member for $20 off the annual membership price by using the coupon code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org. All right, talk to you in a little bit.
All right, for Ask Us Anything at the back end of the show. And coming up next, we're going to talk to a couple of ladies involved in the War of 1812 project on FamilySearch. You may find an amazing source linked to the name of your ancestor at FamilySearch.org. You'll hear all about it coming up next in 3 minutes when we return on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the FamilySearch Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries. stories.
Hey, Genies, our friends at Ancestry.com are not only out there giving us new databases and improved tools for finding our ancestors and connecting with family. Ancestry has now launched its Community Impact Program. The aim of this program is to mobilize ancestry resources and products to build more connected and resilient communities through preserving at-risk history and empowering the next generation of history makers. For example, check out the new and free Danish West Indies record collection with many other at-risk history records at Ancestry.com/Black History. Ancestry is also partnering with Facing History and Ourselves to bring a no-cost Ancestry K-12 program to students everywhere to empower teachers and students to think critically about history. Ancestry is also upgrading its messaging system to improve response as well as to allow you to share pictures with your newfound cousins. Ancestry.com, always looking for ways to improve our genie journeys and make our communities stronger. It has been over 200 years since the War of 1812, and yet we're still studying this as the second war for independence for the United States against Great Britain. Hey, it's Fisher. We're back on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. And our friends over at FamilySearch.org, one of our great sponsors, is working an amazing project right now. It's called the War of 1812 Pension Project, which means you might actually find links to your ancestors on the FamilySearch family tree that connects you right to these incredible records. And I've got two of the people involved in the project right now on the line. Cara Jones, she's the VIP research specialist at the Family History Library with FamilySearch, and Mary Kathryn Kozy, the project administrator, and she's taking care of all kinds of sanctioned volunteers from FamilySearch to put this project together. Hi, ladies. Welcome to Extreme Genes.
Hey, Scott.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Tell me about this project. First of all, how long has it been going on?
So back in the early 2010s, the project started to try to raise money to digitize the War of 1812 pensions, as they had never been preserved before, and they were really starting to deteriorate, you can imagine, after 200 years.
Sure.
Fran Jensen at FamilySearch, she was deputy CGO working under David Rencher. She saw the amazing information in these pension files, and around 2014 decided to pitch a project to David about trying to locate these soldiers in the family tree to try to help aid people who were using the family tree to find the genealogical information in these pension files.
Yeah, and there's a lot of genealogical information in these pension files, just as they were in the Revolutionary War pensions and the Civil War pensions as well. But this is an amazing collection, and this is a project that's going to keep you volunteers busy for a while.
Yes, we figure there are probably somewhere around 80,000 pensions.
And how many so far have you connected to actual people on the family tree?
Around 8,000.
Oh,
actually.
okay. So you're about 10% through it. Talk about some of the things that are in these pensions, because this is going to be really fun if one of the listeners is lucky enough to actually find that one of their ancestors has this link added to their page on FamilySearch.
Okay, so Cara, do you want to talk about the one you found a couple weeks ago?
Oh, sure. So our group of volunteers worked through these pensions, and one of them emailed me a really interesting pension file, and it was for an African-American individual who was applying for a pension, and in those records, it stated that he was a bodyguard for Andrew Jackson.
Oh, wow.
So that was really fascinating.
That is really fascinating. Did he get approved for his pension?
He did not, actually. He was denied. That's an important point to bring up, that even if they aren't approved for a pension, there's still these amazing records to go through.
Yeah, that's really true. And I had an 1812 ancestor also, and he had actually substituted for somebody else. So I guess he got paid off by somebody who had a few more bucks than he did. And he spent like 3 weeks or a month or something in the service in New York. And then when he went to apply for a pension, of course, he couldn't prove that he was the other guy that he had substituted for, because he actually answered to that man's name in service.
I've seen multiple cases like that where they would say, I was called this when I fought, or I answered to my brother's name.
Yes.
I just saw one like that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there's some amazing stories in there. And those are typical of stories that you can actually find in these pension records. Have you found any funny stories in there, Mary Kathryn?
Yes, actually, one of my favorites is a letter. So as you know, these are pensions for the soldiers themselves, but also for their widows. In a lot of cases, we had what were called pension widows, where We have these women who were 30 or 40 years younger would marry these older men, take care of them until they died, and basically know that they were going to get a widow's pension after he died because the men already had a pension. So there's a letter dated, I have it from Millersburg, Pennsylvania, dated March 29th, 1895. Dear sir, will you please suggest how we may be able to prove by persons now living, and though the dead will be raised, they cannot now be raised for this purpose, that this soldier rendered service in 1812, 83 years ago. Is not this silly, or don't we understand each other? Prove by living witnesses that soldiers rendered service 83 years ago, witnesses must necessarily be about 103 years old. So I thought that was hilarious. I just laughed out loud when I was reading that. You find sad, funny, poignant, just about any human emotion you can imagine as you're reading through some of these letters.
There's so much interesting stuff in there, including like old Bible records, family Bible records.
Yes. Yeah, we find those quite frequently, actually. Either the records themselves, where people tore the records out of their Bible and sent them in and pleaded, please return this to me. And, of course, they didn't. Yeah. They're still sitting in the files in NARA. But that's actually a blessing to us because the chances that that Bible record would have survived down the 200 years or whatever are probably less than they would have survived in the archives. But yeah, Bible records, originals torn out. You get affidavits signed where they brought the Bible in and the county clerk transcribed the Bible records, sometimes with all of their children, birth dates, birthplaces, information that just doesn't exist anywhere else. Marriage records. Fran Jensen actually found in one of these, because it was such a late pension, and I think it might have been a daughter who was applying, there was actually a photograph of her in the pension file.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the only one I think we found so far.
So how many people are working on this project now?
We have about 12 volunteers on our team that are going through the files and then trying to find the individuals in the family tree. And in addition to that, we also have about 6 people on a review team that then check the work that our volunteers do just for quality control. Yes. So about 18 in total.
Well, there is always the question, right? Do we have the right John Smith when you go to link the one document to the other? And that makes total sense. So you got quite a crew there. Are they working on this full time?
No. Well, first we should say that we're remote, and we were remote before the pandemic. So our team is all over the country, and it is on a part-time basis. So some individuals work 10 hours a week, some up to 20, and I'm sure Mary Kathryn works on it more than that. But it is a part-time volunteer project.
Wow. How many hours a week are you putting into this, Mary Kathryn?
It varies, because it is kind of an ebb and flow thing. I do the administration of the files, so I check in files from the volunteers, and then I assign them a new file to work on. And so that administrative part takes maybe an hour or 2 a week, and then I'm also part of the review team. So that just sort of ebbs and flows. I've spent as much as 40 hours a week in a given week, and then, as few as maybe 5 or 10, just depending on what's going on in my own life.
Yeah, right. You think about all the conflict that was going on, especially up north in the War of 1812. New York does not have a lot of marriage records, does it, Mary Kathryn?
No, it doesn't. And they're really hard to find. But I was stunned, actually, because I just didn't know that much about the War of 1812 when I started this project, how many men from New York fought in the War of 1812, and then obviously lived long enough to actually apply for a pension, because that's the other thing you have to understand. The first pension acts were during the war for widows and men who were disabled in the war. But as far as the service pensions, where you just had to serve for a specific time, that didn't start until 1871. And so they had to live a long time to even apply to get a pension. So I was amazed at how many men were there from New York. And what stuns me is how often I can go into the family tree, I can look in the pension file, especially widows' pensions will mention when and where they married, because they had to prove that they were the widow of this soldier. And I will go into the family tree, and there is no marriage date.
Wow.
In the tree,
do you
because
add
nobody's
it then?
been able to find a record of their marriage. We have in the past, yes, but what we're doing now to kind of facilitate the pace of the project is to not do that and just attach these pensions now. The last 2,000 out of that 8,000 or so have been added as a source to the individual in the tree, so that then the descendants can come in, look at the source material, find that pension on full tree, go through it themselves, and then find that information. That's what we're hoping to inspire.
Wow.
Is that people will actually go look at these amazing records.
For people who actually had an ancestor who may have been involved in the War of 1812 and you don't know if they actually applied for a pension, the pension requirements for these things became less and less over the years. All you had to do was serve like a week or 2 or 3 and you could apply for a pension. It just didn't matter how few days you served. So if somebody was in there even for the shortest of time, you may be able to find a record where they applied. My wife had an ancestor whose arm was lost when a cannon misfired as he was tamping in the gunpowder and it went off. And so we got full descriptions in there about the accident he was in, how this has affected his life, and what he was hoping that the government would do to help him through that. But it's amazing the details that you can find in this stuff.
Yeah, that's really true. And the other thing that we found that was sort of surprising that I didn't anticipate when we started is how many men actually have more than one pension file.
Oh, wow.
Or there's a soldier's pension where he applied as an invalid or for a service pension early, but then may have been rejected or may have actually gotten a pension, but then he died and then his widow applied.
Sure.
So we have both of those pensions, and sometimes they're all combined into one file and sometimes they're not. The other thing that a lot of people don't know about these pension files is that as NARA was processing these things, if the pensioner, or the soldier rather, had applied for bounty land, then the bounty land files were actually combined with the pension files. So right now, the only way you can get a bounty land file for War of 1812 is to actually write to NARA and pay and request that. But in the case of some of these War of 1812 pension files, they actually include the bounty land applications as well. Some of these files are 100, 150, 200 pages long, especially if they were contested. These people kept writing back, and they'd get more people to sign affidavits and say, yes, I really did marry this guy, or yes, I really did fight in that unit. And so they can get 100, 200 pages long.
This is incredible stuff. It is the War of 1812 Pension Project. It's being performed right now by FamilySearch. My guests are Cara Jones. She's the VIP research specialist at the Family History Library and at FamilySearch. And Mary Kathryn Kozy, the project administrator for this. And ladies, thanks so much for coming on and talking about it. This is pretty exciting stuff. And just to think that at some point we might look on our part of the family tree on FamilySearch and see a link to this incredible material is fantastic. And we thank you for that service.
Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, so much for letting us talk about these amazing records.
And coming up, genealogist Sonny Morton talking about the process of developing ancestral stories as you go about your research when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. Well, it has been a while since I had my good friend Sonny Morton on the line. She is based in Ohio, and Sonny today has a great story for us about the process of finding stories that nobody knows. And Sonny, it's great to have you back on Extreme Genes.
Scott, I'm thrilled to be here because I really want to tell someone this story.
Well, for people who are just getting going in genealogy, perhaps you need to understand exactly what's involved in developing stories about people you don't know much about to begin with. And I think what you've got here is a real good example of that.
Yeah, I think so too. So this is a story about my grandfather's cousin, Anna. So this is the only cousin he ever knew. And it's someone that I really only met when she was a really old lady. My only memory of her is that it was a really big deal when we visited her, that my mom was so excited. We had to be really good as kids. That's all I really knew
dressed
about
up
her.
And everything, bring her a little gift, be polite. But this is interesting because this is kind of a far-fledged branch then from your line, right?
Yes, this is my grandfather's cousin, but it was someone that I at least met, and I knew from the way my mom was with her, I knew that my mom loved her. So I call my mom to ask about Anna. So she is a genealogist too. So her voice immediately turned into her happy genealogy voice, like you just asked $1 million question. So she immediately starts spouting off all of her favorite memories of Anna. And I could tell from her voice how much she loved her, which is interesting because she also freely admitted that Anna was, air quotes, quite a character. And in our family language, that means she was probably pretty cranky and difficult to love.
Right, the language of the family.
So my mom, in fact, thought she might have been estranged even from her own children.
Oh, well, that tells you something.
It does. So my thought also, as somebody who really cares about family legacy, was, well, Mom, then, if Anna was so estranged even from her own children, is it possible that maybe her own grandchildren or great-grandchildren never learned anything about her or never learned anything good about her? Are you the world's leading expert on the good things about Cousin Anna?
That's a good question.
Right? And maybe should we be setting the record straight online or straighter? And my mom was like, well, yeah, absolutely. And so she immediately began to go write something up. So that's really great. Then I decided I would go look for Anna's children. I didn't really know anything about them other than some basic things that my mom already knew. So Anna was born in about the 1890s, and her kids were born around the World War I era. Beyond that, I found hardly anything else that my mom had already told me. So she knew Anna had 4 kids, 3 of them were boys, and one of those boys was a 5-month-old baby who passed away. Oh. So I knew she'd lost 1 kid. So I knew that was somebody I didn't need to research for kids and grandkids. So I started looking into some of these others. And the first thing I found was about her son, John. So he served in World War II. He came home and he got married in 1948. He was 26 years old. 3 weeks later, he's killed in a car accident.
Oh. Wow.
So I found the death certificate, and it's in Washington, and it names the place as the Snoqualmie Pass Highway in Washington. So I go to newspapers.com to get more of the story if I can, and I find this article on a 3-car crash, a spectacular 3-car collision this morning, 8 miles west of here on the rain-slick Snoqualmie Pass Highway, killed 3 persons and injured 5 others. And it mentions him. And then it mentions his wife. So she was in the car with him.
Oh.
Like they're newlyweds, and he's killed. And she sustains head injuries, but she did survive. So then I go look for her remaining son, Clarence. So he also served in World War II. He also survived, came home, started a family. And then I find a Montana death certificate for him in 1955. So he's only about 38 years old. And Scott, you're never going to believe this cause of death.
Okay.
An airplane crash followed by 100% cremation.
Oh my gosh, he burned up. Oh, that's awful. Wow.
But I'm like, Mama, you didn't tell me any of this. And so I'm assuming she has no idea.
Right, yeah.
Cousin Anna outlived 3 sons.
How awful.
So I call my mom to tell her. And meanwhile, I'm pulling up newspapers.com again to look for anything else I can find about this plane crash. I'm telling my mom this stuff, and she's telling me that she had no idea about any of this. So I'm on newspapers.com, and my mom is like, oh, I love your newspapers.com subscription. So do you have relatives who do that?
Oh, yeah. Would you look this up for me?
Would you look this up? So I go on to look for any article about this plane crash, and I find a series of stories, and I start reading them to my mom. And so we are discovering this together in real time. So the first article I find, bad weather delays search for men in planes. And it talks about poor flying conditions. It's preventing a search for men who have been missing for a couple of days. The weather is still terrible, and smoke jumpers are standing by for rescue efforts if they need them. And they're uranium hunters from Tacoma, Washington.
Wow.
So I'm finding out, like, dang, wow. And a couple days later, a couple more articles come out. His wife has come in town to wait out the search. So she's there, and she's all like, you know what, they're going to be fine. She said all 3 of these people on the plane were experienced woodmen. The company plane was really well equipped. She said they have rations for 3 days. They've got a rifle. They're going to be fine. Well, it took more than a year to find the follow-up article. Plane identity definitely established. Wreckage of a small plane found in a wilderness area about 65 miles southeast of Kalispell has been positively established as the craft which carried 3 Tacoma, Washington uranium hunters to death more than a year ago.
Oh, incredible.
The gas tanks ignited when the craft crashed into a mountain about 10 miles southwest of a ranger station. The 3 uranium hunters had been seated between the gas tanks. The fire was so hot that even the aluminum melted.
Oh, my gosh.
So this prompts my mom to remember that there was a family Bible entry in Cousin Anna's handwriting where she wrote in the death of this son. And all it says is buried in the mountains of Montana.
How tragic. This woman lost all these kids. Unbelievable.
She did. So now we're left with these two different sets of information that we have about Anna's family. We have in her life, we have my mom's memories of this woman who was both cantankerous and compassionate, who was extraordinary and extraordinarily cranky. And then we have these records unfold about what she went through in the loss of 3, at least, of her 4 children, and we still can't find that daughter. And if Cousin Anna was kind of cranky sometimes, I think I have a better idea why.
Sure, yeah.
So now it's become even more important to both of us to do 2 things, Scott. And the first is find those descendants.
Right.
And the second is tell the story.
Yep, get it online. Get it out there.
Get it online. We have shared family trees online in a couple of different places where we collaborate and we put everything we find. And so the idea is now anyone who happens to take an interest in Cousin Anna in the future, like I did, they're going to have a much better and bigger story to learn about her.
Isn't the sharing process fantastic? Sometimes you can put something up there and years go by, and then suddenly you get a message from someone going, wow, hi, I'm your cousin, and thank you so much for posting this or that or the other thing. I mean, I think it's a huge thing to do. And I love the process, Sonny, and the thoughts and how it all comes together. I mean, it's an amazing journey you just took.
You know, it is. What I think is kind of stunning to me is that this is someone I remember and whose life was still a real mystery to us. We thought we knew about her and we didn't know jack squat.
She's Sonny Morton. She's a genealogist. She's a teacher. You can follow her and learn all kinds of stuff like this at sonnymorton.com. Sonny, thanks so much for coming on the show. Love the process. Love the results of it. And good luck as you work on phase 3.
Thanks so much, Scott.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert with another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show in 3 minutes.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the FamilySearch Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. All right, back at it with Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. I am Fisher. That is David Allen Lambert. He is the Chief Genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. And Dave, our first question for Ask Us Anything today is from Adam in Augusta, Georgia. And he says, guys, my ancestor was connected with Andrew Carnegie back in the day. Even though he wasn't famous, do you know of any sources that can tell me more about this association? That's a good question.
It really is a good question because, the first thing that would come to mind is let's see what papers and diaries and letters of Andrew Carnegie that may mention his ancestor show up. And they must be in some archives around there. I'd have to take a little bit of deep digging to look for Andrew Carnegie archives. But the Carnegie Foundation probably would be the first place I'd contact.
Oh, it might be as simple as finding an autobiography or biography that talks about these things. I've got several of these types of relationships in my lines as well. I had one guy who was said to have helped build the engine for Fulton's Folly with Robert Fulton, so tried researching the records of Robert Fulton. Haven't found any mention of my ancestor in there, but still it's a source of research. And then there was another relative who was connected with Commodore Vanderbilt. And they were in business together. So I have found references to him in autobiographies and histories of Vanderbilt and some of the businesses he was involved in. And so as a result, this relative of mine became fairly well known on his own, even though he himself didn't warrant a biography or an autobiography. And then there was one more on another branch of the family where my relative was connected to David Belasco, the famous producer of plays along Broadway. He was a stage carpenter, and this was very early in Belasco's career, so they kind of crossed paths for a brief period of time, about 10 years in the 1880s. So studying about Belasco, I would find something more about my relative. So that's a great way to go.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, for me, I've found that I have a couple of close relatives whose siblings were more famous in history than my own. My ancestor, Anne Sewell, who was married to William Longfellow, she had a brother who was the judge at the witchcraft trials, but Samuel Sewell was a great diarist and actually kept a diary from the late 17th century till when he died in the early 1700s. And they're published, but he talks about going to visit Sister Longfellow, or better yet, he's talking about the witchcraft trials. So to have somebody that's written up like that allows me to see a context of a great uncle. And sometimes relatives have a more famous sibling that may have papers that survived.
Yeah, that's right. Any connection around that family, you can dig up the story. And for me, that's really so much of the fun of family history research, is discovering those stories in obscure places. And one day I actually talked to a cousin who found a reference to a cabinet, a big bookcase that my ancestor Fisher had built in the 1840s in New York City, and it was apparently part of the apartment of Leonard Bernstein in his place at the Dakota building where John Lennon was eventually killed. And so they had pictures of it and described it. So I was actually able to reach out to the owners of that after Bernstein had passed away. It was auctioned off at like $50,000. But here was this write-up in New York Magazine. Never expected to find that. And so sometimes finding these famous connections like that can lead you to all kinds of fascinating discoveries, and it's really worth digging in. It might take you a long time, but if you keep scratching away at all these possible sources and get imaginative, you might find some things that might raise a few eyebrows.
There you go.
So thank you, Adam, for the question. I hope that helps out, and I hope you find that connection to Andrew Carnegie with your ancestor. And coming up next, David, we have another question, this one having to do with old ships in Connecticut. Yeah, when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, final segment of Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. We're doing Ask Us Anything with David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. And David, we got this email from Margaret in Virginia, and she writes, "My ancestor was said to have owned several ships in Connecticut in the early 1800s. Are you aware of any database that can tell me more about these ships? Thank you, guys." David.
Very interesting. Well, first thing that quickly comes to mind are the great databases that you can find online for newspapers. So obviously something that may say he owns a particular vessel or vessels, newspapers.com might be one place to go. So put your ancestor's name in and put in vessel or ship or owner. That would be good. But the one thing you might want to look at, once you know the name of the vessels, is the Lloyd's list. Now, the Lloyd's list, Lloyd's of London, has been listing in their registrars vessels since 1764. Here's the best part. Their database from 1764 straight through to 1945 is completely online.
Really?
And so how you can find this list, if you Google search Lloyd's Register Foundation, Heritage and Education Center, you'll find that they have them digitized right there. You can find that one batch is 1764 to 1804. Another is 1805 to 36. And that goes on to cover right on down to 1945 to the end of World War II.
Wow.
I'll give you an example. One of the ones I have here, here's one from 1854, and it says the number of the ship on the rolls, the name of the ship, the master of the ship. So if your ancestor was an owner and, the master, the captain of the vessel.
The master of his ship.
Exactly. By George, I think you've got it. The tonnage of the vessel, when it was built, where it was built, who the owners are, which is, of course, relevant to our question, the port it's belonging to. So if it says, a Connecticut port, that may help. And then I will say the destined voyage that it currently is on. So if you're, finding that the person is looking at 1854, where was it going at that point in time? And then it gives you any other specifics on the characteristics on the vessel itself. Now, what's interesting, if you look at the Lloyd's list and you look at, say, the one from 1912, 1913, you'll find that the Titanic is listed as sunk. And this is going to be true with one of your ancestors' vessels. If it was damaged or scrapped or sunk, you'll find reference to that actually in the Lloyd's list.
That's incredible. That is great stuff. And, this is one of the things about genealogy that we're always doing is trying to find new sources that we're not familiar with. And, when you talked about, David, what trip they were on at a given point in time, it makes you realize, there must be multiple entries for the same ship then, because it would be year to year, trip to trip. The other thing that would be key to this is the fact that many of these ships back in the day had the same name. There were many Mayflowers. But if you have all this information relating to a particular ship, you can really narrow it down to determine which is the one you're looking for, based on place, based on tonnage, based on trips and the owners and all these things. So it's just really like researching a person, isn't it?
It really is. It's the genealogy of a vessel, especially if your ancestor, like our listener has said, owned more than one. You may find multiple entries. And, when you're searching through this, who knows? You may even find more vessels than you didn't know that they owned as you browse through these great lists. All
right. Great answer, David. Thank you for that. And thank you, Margaret, for the question. If you have a question for Ask Us Anything, you can always email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. David, talk to you next week.
Look forward to it.
All right. And that's our show for this week, Genies. Thanks for joining us. Hey, if you missed any of it, catch the podcast on iTunes, iHeartRadio, extremegenes.com, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, you name it. Talk to you next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.